So basically what it means is human beings, our brains naturally weigh heavier the things that are easy to process. It's easy to process that today I'm going to lose revenue because I have a crappy employee.
It's time for bookkeeping, beer, and BS. But the question we posed here before the commercial break was this. You got that bad performer and you're booked out 4+ weeks. Do you start recruiting, hire a couple people, hopefully to potentially replace that person? You know, once you hire them or you think you've got them hired or you get them in training, then you let the person go. Or do you just rip that Band-Aid off right away and then put that pedal down on recruiting right away the minute you let them go? And like Sean said earlier, you should have just been recruiting the whole time, but you weren't. Now here you are. You just let them go and then scramble. Now there's we're going to stick with the scenario because it's already been painted. I think an even more dire scenario is when you run a recurring service business. If you're like in maid service or lawn care or pest control where you have a route, it's even harder to let that person go because 4 to 6 weeks of like appointments, you have a little more flexibility. But when it's a bi-weekly client, you got to be there every 2 weeks and they got a relationship with that person. Then it gets even like a little goofier. Anyway, Michael, I cut you off when you were going to get into it, and then we played some commercials, but here we are back. What do you think?
That was good teeing it up because I was about to do the same thing. You did it way better than I would. So my answer would be
that's why I get paid the big bucks to be the show host.
I know. Yeah. I could tell. You're sitting in like a third-rate bar. It looks fantastic.
You should see what this room actually looks like. Embarrassing.
So the answer, I mean, Sean nailed it. Like, it does depend. There's no black and white answer, like always do this and always fire somebody. But the question I would start with, will corrective action or progressive discipline solve the issue, right? If it's a cancer, somebody who's like literally lying or cheating or stealing, like there's certain like red flags. But
foolish evil, if they're evil, that's
yes, exactly. So that, I mean, of course, there's that. But I mean, in the gray area where they're just not performing or producing at the level that you require people to do. Is it a training issue? Is it something that they just don't have the tools or the resources where they don't have the fancy new truck with all the fancy new things and they just can't do it? So you want to kind of look at it case by case, but really it all comes down to culture. One thing I like to always talk about is consistency and predictability. Consistency is doing the same thing every single time, all the time, which you can always change your process, but when you change it, be consistent in how you change it. And then predictability means, is it predictable? When an employee comes in late, do they know what's going to happen, right? Do they know, is it everything that happens throughout the day? They know, oh, this happened. So as a result, this is also going to happen. So consistency and predictability is incredibly important in every single business, and always be recruiting for the reason of your measurables. People are, especially as you grow as a percentage, you're just naturally going to have that bottom 20% of people, and 20% of 4 is a lot smaller than 20% of 50. So as you scale, you have to always be aware that you're going to have that 80-20 rule applying with everything that you have in business. And another one too is, this is what I talk about in coaching all the time. It's this nerdy term in cognitive behavior called availability heuristic. You guys ever heard this phrase before, or term before?
I haven't, but I like it.
Or availability bias. So basically what it means is human beings, our brains naturally weigh heavier the things that are easy to process. It's easy to process that today I'm going to lose revenue because I have a crappy employee. If I let them go, I'm going to lose revenue today. But it's harder to process the impact that they're having on the other employees, the messages you're sending to the other employees by not getting rid of this person and forcing them to work in an environment that could potentially be unhealthy. And again, there's different levels of unhealthy work environment. But what message does it send? And that goes to the consistency and predictability, right? Is if you're letting one person who's an A player, high top performer, who's a toxic or cancerous employee work, it's creating a message to everybody else that you can also show up for late to work, or you can also call out, no call, no show. You can also treat people, poorly or against your core values because they do a really good job. So you have to be really careful, and it's a lot more difficult to process the long or medium and long-term vision of your company because of what's happening today or this week. And Sean, I think both of you mentioned, calling those customers and explaining the situation of what's going on. 9 times out of 10, of course, you're going to have your anomalies, but the customers are going to be very grateful knowing that you're not going to send a toxic employee, or you've had an issue where you care deeply about them and their safety and whatever it could be. So making sure that you're communicating that, and the short-term losses for long-term gains, the long-term is going to greatly outpace it, because it's going to make a stronger culture. It's going to make your team respect you more. It's going to create that consistency and predictability that every business needs. And what would you do, or what do you do if somebody has cancer? You cut it out. You got to get rid of it. And otherwise it's just going to grow. And you've heard so many stories. Brandon Vaughn, his employees suck and I quit video that has like 50,000 views now, all came from one cancerous employee that talked 5 people or 6, whatever it was, into quitting. One day he showed up and nobody showed up to work. If he would have fired that employee early on, it wouldn't have happened.